And welcome to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Glad you're with us. And this is a show where each week we deal with topical issues and talk to interesting people. And we've certainly got one this week that's both topical and our guest will prove to be interesting.
Well, that's true, and it's a subject near and dear to your heart, you journalism major you, taught at the journalism school at the University of Oklahoma. We're talking about the plight of newspapers in the United States now. How different it is today than it was 5-10 years ago.
It's happening, well, the changes are happening quickly and largely because of the internet. But this is a newspaper that has a presence in both Oklahoma City and Tulsa. We should get a very interesting response.
Yes, a Journal Record is a paper that brings a lot of good news every day and timely and in really well-written fashion. And we're going to talk to the two people primarily responsible for that happening.
It's coming up today on The Verdict.
What if America had its own clean energy? Abundant and available for the next century or more, and possibly indefinitely. A true 21st century energy source would cut carbon emissions in half and do every living thing a world of good. That clean American energy exists. It's natural gas, and Chesapeake is its #1 explorer. For producing clean electricity and fueling our cars without imported oil, natural gas saves money and the environment. Proving the answer to this country's energy needs is right under our feet, and we're not running out. Clean, abundant, affordable, American natural gas. Doing a world of good for our communities, our economy, and our irreplaceable planet Earth.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
And welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Very pleased today to have one return guest and one new guest. Our return guest is to my right, Mary Malone. She's the publisher of the Journal Record newspaper, Journal Record Publishing Company. She did her undergraduate work in journalism at the University of Oklahoma. She's recently been appointed, among other things, to be on the Urban Renewal Authority of Oklahoma City. She's the chairman of the board of Leadership Oklahoma. She's involved in many other civic and cultural activities here, and this is her second visit to The Verdict. Mary, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
Glad to have you.
Glad
to my
to be
left
here.
is Ted Streuli. Ted is the managing editor of the Journal Record. He's been with the Journal Record since 2004. He first got interested and he started in the newspaper business when he was in the 6th grade and hasn't slowed down since. He likewise, as is Mary, very active in the things that are going on in this community. And we're really pleased to have you join us, Ted.
Glad to be here.
Yeah. Welcome to both of you. Tell us how things are in general going at the Journal Record.
You know, things at the Journal Record are just as busy as they've ever been. You know, this economic slowdown has certainly captured all of us in some way, but our circulation is up, our events are doing very well, softening in some areas, but a lot of strength in other areas. So we're doing really well.
And Ted, there seems to be plenty to talk about.
Well, there is.
Or write about, I guess, in this case.
Absolutely. It's a good time for business journalism.
How do you choose topics? What's the process?
You know, there are some that are day-to-day breaking news, that something happens at the Capitol or happens out in the world, and other stories that we plan well in advance that we want to get in depth into a topic. You might remember we did the Core Shore package not too long ago that we spent a long time preparing for.
Now, Ted, you do a lot of the editorial writing, I take it.
I do.
How do you decide what you're going to editorialize about?
Well, we do two different things. I write a column every week, which often serves as the voice of the paper. And I take a little more latitude in the personal column and have a little fun with some topics, sometimes poke a little fun here and there. When we do an unsigned editorial, Mary and I agree in advance on what position we're going to take. And that'll be pretty straightforward, and we'll take a stand on an issue one side or the other. Usually it's going to be something that directly affects the business community and the state and which way we think it ought to go.
Mary, let me ask you a kind of a related question. In the journalism field, not necessarily just at the Journal Record, are there topics that are just considered off limits for editorial comment, or is anything fair game?
Well, I would say, I hate to speak for everybody in general, but for us specifically, there are certainly topics that are off limits. And we try to stay true to our mission and our niche, which is things related to the business community. And even in our capital coverage, we try to focus primarily on business-related issues. Broadly speaking, it kind of appears that anything is fair game in some of what you see, but we really do try to stay true to our mission.
Well, speaking of your mission, you publish both in Oklahoma City and Tulsa, or distribute both in Tulsa and Oklahoma City.
We sure do. We've been in Tulsa for a little over 3 years, and we actually opened a bureau there. So we have some full-time staff living and working in Tulsa. And we really saw a need for real specific daily business news coverage in Tulsa. And we've done very, very well there. We've grown quite a bit, and look forward to continuing growth there.
I would expect that the business model for the newspaper business has changed with the continuing success of the internet, and more people are relying on that for information.
Oh, certainly. And, you know, it's really our role, I think, is to deliver people in the method that they want to be delivered to, whether it's the paper product or through internet. Ted was mentioning the Core Shore project. That project, and you were involved in that, had a really strong printed piece, but it also had a very strong internet component as well that included video.
Well, how does the internet get involved in the revenue side of the equation?
And that's the ongoing struggle, and that's what we're seeing, especially with a lot of the general interest newspapers who didn't really buy into the fact that we have to deliver news to people the way they want it. And I think they're struggling a lot more than we are as a niche product. But the revenue piece, if we were just to cut out our print product today, we don't have enough revenue from the internet side to stay in business.
Ted, I've been fortunate enough to work a little bit in radio, somewhat in television, and been involved in the newspaper business occasionally as well. And what strikes me as a former journalist, I would see a story and I would think, well, that would be a great television story, or that would be a good newspaper story, or that would really do well on radio. What stories do well on the internet? What are there stories that come along and you say, you know, the internet's a perfect medium for this specific topic?
Well, there are, and I think. You know, we've talked about how in the past those different mediums have differentiated themselves from one another by their delivery method. And I think the future is that we're going to have to differentiate ourselves by content, because now we can all do video, we can all do audio, we can all do print, and we're all doing all of those things. So in our case, in a business story, we come across some things that just really lend themselves to video, especially a lot of feature type stories, profiles, executive interviews, history pieces, that kind of thing, work really well on the internet in a 2-minute video, especially if they've got a companion written piece to go with them that's maybe both in print and both on the web.
Are you getting the students with the IT abilities? Are the students coming in technically equipped to be able to handle where the business is and where the business is going?
Absolutely. Our newest employees that are fairly recent J-School grads come in completely prepared. Of course, none of them know what an X-Acto knife or ruby lith is, but they've all been trained in all different delivery formats. So they may want to kind of specialize in print. They may think of themselves as primarily a writer, but they can all use a video camera and edit video.
Interesting, because I remember when I was in journalism school generations and decades ago, it seemed as if the universities were ill-equipped to be able to present a student with a real-life environment because the equipment was expensive and journalism schools didn't have it, and so you were really dealing with inferior type of an environment. But now when I visit journalism schools, I almost get the opposite impression, that the journalism schools have equipment that's advanced from the industry.
Oh, no doubt about it. And we've had that talk with some of our newer reporters. Our reporter in Tulsa, who's just a couple years out of OU J School, we specifically talked to her and said, okay, you've left the University of Oklahoma now, your computer's older, everything's a little bit older. I mean, not that our stuff is terrible, but it is not as advanced as they have it.
But I guess that's an advantage for the student in
absolutely.
that they're getting these great experiences.
Sure, absolutely.
Let me ask you both this, and I'll ask Ted and then Mary chime in if you will. It kind of strikes me as, in a way, sad to see institutions like the New York Times struggling, Boston Globe, Wall Street Journal, and many of the classic sit down and spend some time reading newspapers, struggling or perhaps not going to make it. Just there's a part of our cultural history that we're losing there and likely to lose. How does that hit you?
Well, I think anybody in the business is just heartbroken to see some of those papers go. But although it's accelerated recently, it's not really a new thing. Major metro dailies have had declining circulation for 60 years. And for much of the 70s and 80s, we had a lot of 2 newspaper markets that operated under joint operating agreements. Right. And you know, that didn't save any of them in the long run. The San Antonio Light's gone, the San Francisco Examiner, for all intents and purposes, is gone, the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, the Rocky Mountain News. They, one time or another, all had JOAs.
Tribune, I guess.
Right. And so that struggle's been in place a long time. It's accelerated recently, but it's not because we have fewer readers, which is the encouraging part. We've got more readers than ever because all those web readers are new readers who aren't and never would have been print readers. So we've nearly doubled the number of people reading our stuff every day. So the real issue is that dilution of the ad revenue that's hurting the print product.
Let me jump in and get us to a break. We're visiting with Mary Malone and Ted Streuli. They run with others the Journal Record in both Oklahoma City and Tulsa. Kent and I'll be back and visit more with them after this.
I'm Dr. Suzanne Van Kooten, a research hydrometeorologist at National Severe Storms Lab, and I'm a Chickasaw. There's a stewardship there, I think, that's within Native Americans and the protectionist of the land, and are we going to leave things better than when we came in, that came across in how I did my job. I had a true passion for it because I realized that this was what we had always done. We'd always been so involved with the land and taking care of the land, but also taking care of people. So that is truly the stream that you go down as a meteorologist. You want to protect lives and property. The Chickasaw Nation does an amazing job with our education programs. There are no excuses for you not to succeed as a Chickasaw in education. That's fundamental. That's fundamental to the success of the nation, is this education aspect, because knowledge literally is power.
Home values are down in some states, but not in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's home values have increased 4.2% during the past 12 months. Unlike some states where home values have decreased as much as 20%. Good thing you're in Oklahoma. There may be real estate problems in some states, but there has never been a better time than now to buy or sell a home in Oklahoma. One of the most affordable states in the country, Oklahomans are buying and selling homes every day, and an Oklahoma realtor can show you how. Good thing you're in Oklahoma.
That land next door was a mess. Take more than a lawnmower to revive that land. I heard the oil and natural gas people was cleaning up old oil sites, and it wouldn't cost us a blood nickel. Oh, yes, sir, it was quite a revival. The whole church showed up, want to make a playground for the kids. It sure is a blessing.
Welcome back to The Verdict. We're visiting with Mary Malone and Ted Streuli. They run the Journal Record. And Kent, where to now?
Well, we've seen, Ted was talking about some of the classic newspapers having difficulty. We also have seen in the past some consolidations that have taken place. We know, of course, in Oklahoma we had a consolidation under the Newspaper Preservation Act of the Tulsa World and the Tulsa Tribune. Now I guess the Tribune's now gone and the World still exists. Should we expect to see further consolidations that would affect news in Oklahoma?
Yeah, I'm not sure about Oklahoma. You know, the small town community newspapers, I think, while some are suffering and some may just go away, those are towns that have one newspaper anyway. And there's not much place to consolidate other than those rural communities, and in the big cities we have the Daily Oklahoman, we have the Tulsa World. They're even doing some things together, which is interesting to see. And then we have the niche products that are left.
Well, and we see some television stations doing some things with newspapers. Yeah. I don't know about the ins and outs of that, but I presume that's a different kind of consolidation.
Right, and I think it's really just it's a partnering. It's a sharing of resources, because as we all have to be very conscious of the resources and the expenses that we have, I think people are looking to do things together.
You have had a program that's been going on for several years, honoring young leaders, and you call it, let me get the name right, is it Achievers Under 40?
Achievers Under 40.
And you choose 40. Is that right?
Something like that.
Okay.
You know, are different than some other programs that really do just choose 40. We actually just honored 41 a few weeks ago.
And you choose that from a combined Oklahoma City and Tulsa market?
Statewide market. So we had some honorees we had a couple from Ardmore and Wynnewood and Norman and far reaches of the state.
Well, how are they selected? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, that's basically the same question. What do you learn through that process, and what is the process?
First and foremost, it is so encouraging for the future of our state, because these young people are just amazing, bright, talented, motivated individuals. But what we look for specifically is their success thus far in their professions, but we also look for their commitment to giving back to their communities. So there is really a combined effort here of people who are doing very well, working really hard. Generally, young people are putting in lots of hours and they're working to build their careers, but the very special ones that are selected by us also are serving on boards, and they're doing volunteer work. They're trying to give back to their communities.
Ted, what is your view of the incoming journalism new hire today from a standpoint of education, commitment, dedication, compared to what your experience has been earlier?
Well, I think they're coming out technologically really well prepared. The J schools seem to be doing a great job of giving them a really well-rounded education in journalism. I think in my day it was, you were going to be a newspaper reporter, so you learned to write, or you were going to be a broadcast reporter and you learned that. And now they've just got a diversity. They're coming out with a wider variety of tools and less of a specialization, and I think that's going to be critical as we all move into a variety of delivery methods.
Ted, what do you see in the business community? What's the future of business in Oklahoma City and Tulsa from your vantage point?
Well, I think it has to be pretty good, especially in the current economy. We look around Oklahoma, and we've lost a couple of key players, especially in the manufacturing sector. But boy, all the signs in real estate and residential housing and those kinds of developments are just all so positive. And as anybody in this state knows, we didn't have the bubble, so we didn't have the bust. And I think there's just a lot of attention on us right now as one of the stable markets around the country where it's practical to come here and live here and build a business here without the wild fluctuations that the coasts have seen.
Are you seeing people in Oklahoma businesses bringing people in from other parts of the country to work and live in Oklahoma? There seems to be some sort of reversal of the grapes of wrath, some sort of wrath of grapes that's taking place, moving people back from California to Oklahoma. But it's not just California; there's other places.
There are, and most of those where people are coming in from out of state are the really expensive parts of the country, the coasts, where our cost of living and our price of real estate, especially right now, is really an attractive recruiting tool. So we're seeing some of that.
Mary, give us a little bit of a history of the Journal Record. Who started it? How did it get started? Why did somebody see a need for a business newspaper, I guess first in Oklahoma City, later in Tulsa?
Well, we started producing a legal-only publication. So we ran the public notices for Oklahoma starting back in 1903, before Oklahoma was a state. So from that point then, ownership changed a couple of times, and we became a real business journal format in about the mid-'80s. It was owned by Dan Hogan then. Max Nichols was the editor. He's a longtime Oklahoma icon. And then Dolan Media Company bought us in 1995, just a couple months after the bombing. And from that point, we've really put a focused effort into improving the quality of our coverage. We moved into Tulsa, as I mentioned, about 3 years ago, really because we saw it as a growth model. We'd been talking about it for years, and we felt like the time was right to move in and add that to our coverage. So we don't have two different papers. We produce one paper every day that is distributed in Tulsa as well as Oklahoma City.
I am a subscriber and do look at it daily, and notice that there seems to be a clear balance between stories that relate to Tulsa primarily and stories that relate to Oklahoma City. I suppose that's by design.
We work really hard at that. And depending on what day it is, we might get an Oklahoma City subscriber saying, hey, there have been too many Tulsa stories, or vice versa, but we really do work at balancing it. There are a lot of things that factor into that. Having a good picture and having really good stories is the first and foremost.
We got about a minute left. What's the future of business dailies like yours across the country? What's the immediate future? Are you all expanding? Are you all stable? What's the reaction?
You know, I think we are poised in a really good place, just like Oklahoma is, to really continue to grow. The Journal Record in Oklahoma was ranked 7th nationally for circulation growth for a daily last year. Wow. And so and we're really proud of that. That's significant when you see a lot of declining circulations. But we have to be right at the cutting edge of the internet and everything else that we're doing online also. So we're certainly not sitting back and taking it for granted.
So you better be paying attention to what's around the corner.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Mary Malone, thanks very much for coming on.
Thank you.
And Ted, thanks for the great work you all are doing for the business people in Oklahoma and then the readers. And we continue to watch with amazement how the industries are evolving, and interested to see how the Journal Record comes through all of this.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks for having us.
Kit and I'll have a final word after this.
All children deserve a life of hope and love. but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
We are wrapping up a show of Ted Streuli and Mary Malone of the Journal-Record.
They do a grand job bringing news both to Oklahoma City and Tulsa, and we appreciate their being with us.
And we give website information for our guests, and that's the case today. Be sure and check out what the newspaper has to offer on the journalrecord.com. That's journalrecord.com. And of course, you can go to our website, theverdict.tv. We'll see you next week.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.